Hello, and welcome back to Epworth Bible Moments. Let me offer a word of warning. This episode contains information about sexuality, as much of the Bible does, and it may not be appropriate for small children. So we skipped over several chapters that tell about the birth of Isaac, but let's go back and see what we missed. Chapter 18 continues with the same three men, or the Lord, who visited Abraham and Sarah, confronting Abraham with the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. This was the land that Abraham's nephew Lot chose. And in an interesting tit for tat with God, Abraham begs the Lord to spare the righteous, even if there are only 10 righteous people in the city. Well, eventually God agrees, but apparently Lot didn't have much righteous company. Because in chapter 19 we find that two angels visited Lot, who extended traditional hospitality to them, much as Abraham had done. But indicative of the wickedness of the city, the men of Sodom attacked Lot's house, wishing to abuse his visitors, wishing to abuse them sexually. Lot offered his daughters instead. Now, it's hard for us to imagine a man who would sacrifice his virgin daughters to protect his male visitors, but this is yet another example of the powerlessness of women in this patriarchal culture. So the men of Sodom attempted to breach the door to punish Lot. He was a stranger to them, and they thought he was judging them. But the angels protected Lot by striking the men of Sodom with blindness. Now, what follows is a familiar story of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot urged his sons-in-law, they were called sons-in-law, though they were only betrothed to his daughters, urged them to leave with him, but they did not. Only Lot, his wife, and his two daughters. Note in chapter 19, verse 16, that Lot lingered, and the messengers, these angels from God, or God, the messengers had to drag him out of the city by hand, telling him to run and not look back. But Lot protested, and he even bartered with the Lord to please let him go to Zoar instead of the mountains. Now, I emphasize this because in spite of his reluctance, Lot survived. His wife simply looked back when they arrived in Zoar, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And then the Bible says the next morning Abraham awoke to see the destruction, the smoke, and knew that Sodom had been destroyed. Now for a word of commentary. Nowhere does the Bible say the sin of Sodom was homosexuality. And it's clear that the men of Sodom wanted to abuse anybody who was a stranger or other, or who they thought had judged them. There is no mention of a specific wickedness. In fact, the prophet Ezekiel offered the only Old Testament list of the sins of Sodom. It says this was the guilt of Sodom: pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease. But they did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty and did abominable things. If you want to know more about what the Bible says about homosexuality, I'm happy to share with you a brief commentary that I wrote many years ago. But back to the Bible and the story of Lot. You'll find a troubling postscript in this story. Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 through 38 tells us that Lot's two daughters conspired to get him drunk and seduce him in order to give him offspring. Why would they do such a thing? Maybe they thought all humans had been destroyed and that was their only way to have children. Maybe the patriarchal ideals had been so impressed upon them that they thought it was their duty to give their father offspring. Either way, this is one of the many stories in Genesis where the biblical writer tells us that when women take matters into their own hands, bad things often happen. In this case, the two sons born to Lot through his daughters are eponymous with future enemies of Israel: Moab, father of the Moabites, and Ben-Ami, father of the Ammonites. See you next time on Epworth Bible Moments.